Good morning, one and all.
Good morning.
You know, some of you know, I've been MIA for 5 weeks now, and I was just thinking, paying attention to your every word, Paula, and at the same time thinking about, gosh, over the past 5 weeks, I've slept in 5 different bedrooms. And you know that sense when you first wake up, or if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're thinking, whose house is this? What room am I in? And most importantly, where's the bathroom? And so I just returned home from Unity Village doing some work down there. Got home Friday night, and I'm still in that mode of, I live here. Like, I actually know the layout here. So none of that means anything, but it was what I was thinking about while we were opening this morning. I did a lot of reading during my sabbatical, which I love to do, and I had a whole stack of books in my intention, and I made it through, I don't remember, maybe a third or half of those. And on a recommendation of a minister friend of mine in June, when I was in Kansas City working, I read some work by a guy named Michael Newton, 3 books, and I read them back to back, riveted. I would love to share this with you. It's jam-packed, full of interesting stuff, so I'm inviting you to unfasten your seatbelt and to listen really fast. And I also want to preface today's message with the disclaimer that we are working outside of Unity teachings and Unity writings. So for those of you who are fairly new to Unity, know that I am outside of that arena. I also know that this is a topic conversation that I've had with many of you and many other folks. I know it's a universal curiosity topic. So the Unity principles to which we relate are the first principle, always drink water when necessary. The first principle, there's one presence and one power, God the good. Keep that in mind. The second principle is that we are each an expression or a spark of that divine nature. I beg your pardon. And we'll also touch on a couple of Unity's metaphysical principles. So our resource material is primarily the first book by Newton, which is called Journey of Souls. And the second book is called The Destiny of Souls. Newton's background is this. He has a doctorate in counseling psychology. He is a certified master hypnotherapist, and he's also the 2005 founder of the Newton Institute. His career in this particular arena, which is called, I'm so sorry. That was my last cough drop. If anybody's packing this morning, I'd like to know about it. Thank you. His career in these studies called Life Between Lives, LBL, spans 35 years and includes over 7,000 case studies. So I'm well aware today that I am presenting highlights of these case studies from one practitioner, and I would like you to be aware with me that we're not presenting some sort of metaphysical truth or some sort of unity truth. It's fascinating research. So in the foreword of his first book, Newton describes incorporating hypnotherapy and past life regression in his counseling practice, and doing this primarily to get at some of our core issues that we live with in life. And the particular case that revealed this life between life situation to him involved getting to a source of chronic pain. In the midst of the session, while in hypnotherapy, the client said, "I miss some friends from my group, and that's why I get so lonely on earth." He was confused and didn't know where she was coming from, so when he asked clarifying questions, she started telling him that she was talking about her soul group and being in this place of life between lives in this session. So Newton had inadvertently stumbled into this character's soul group and her life between lives just prior to this current lifetime. So over 30 plus years, he honed his skill in asking questions that helped him discern between a hypnotized client's past life experience and their experience in spirit world of life between lives. So in describing how it's possible to contact these levels of consciousness in his patients, he actually describes one of Unity co-founders, Charles Fillmore's metaphysical trinities. He says that in hypnotism, he can contact the conscious mind. He can contact the subconscious mind, which is our soul vault of life experience. And he can contact the supermind, which Fillmore would call God mind, the superconscious. And Newton refers to that as the soul consciousness. So with all that context set up, I'm going to fly through some nuggets of what these case studies revealed. And the books are basically Newton's narrative and then verbatim dialogue between he and the client in the sessions. So we discovered that there are distinct stages in our soul journey, and these stages came up time and time and time again in the client data. Of course, the descriptions vary a little bit depending on one's own soul aspect. So, of course, our journey to life between lives begins with leaving this physical body. And in an overwhelming percentage of the cases, people describe hovering over the death scenario, desperately trying to communicate reassurance and solace to their loved ones, and desperately hoping that the loved one is aware of the soul presence there. Also, it's interesting because they report this instantaneous knowing that they still live. There is no death, as we call it, in the human experience. They know that the soul is still alive, and they have an interesting non-attachment to the physical body. Pardon me. Also, they consistently report a euphoric sense of freedom. Euphoric. And one thing that gave me peace of mind, particularly in the scenario of tragic death is that a huge percentage of the time the soul leaves the physical body in the seconds before the physical body actually goes through that trauma. Then some report traveling through a sort of tunnel into brilliant light, and others report instantly being bathed in it. It's like some people almost called it like being zoomed to it, being drawn to it. And Nina, I thought about you because a lot of people reported this very relaxing sensation of vibrational tones, vibrational music that they found very peaceful and restful. So I don't know about you, but I've always wondered, we talk about when we get to the other side and our angel team meets us, or, there are people there to greet us. And I always wondered, how does that work? Because I've never had a vision that we have any kind of physical form in spirit world. This physical form, the skin suit, is about being in the earthly plane. So I'm like, if I get to the other side and Ruth is there, how do I know that's you? How do we communicate that? So it turns out that we each do have very individualized teams or groups of people that meet us. And what they do, apparently, especially in the very initial stages of us showing up in spirit world, there's this little orientation period of, wait a second, what just happened? So what happens is our soul peeps take on these physical characteristics so that we're recognizing. One comment that jumps out at me was this woman was talking about showing up in spirit world and realizing that these beings were coming to greet her, and she goes, "Oh, there's Uncle Harry," and then she chuckles and she says, "He's still fat." So obviously we take on physical characteristics for recognition. We might be met by soul mate. We might be met by members of our soul group. We might be met by family members. And always, 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 sometimes in the foreground, sometimes in the background, we're met by our spirit guide. So, and we communicate via ethereal thought with them. That's not a language or words. One of the things that I read about that surprised me a lot, I just hadn't thought about it before. So when we're getting ready to reincarnate to another physical experience, we leave a percentage of our soul behind in spirit world. And there were some specific information about that, and basically when we're at that stage where we're putting together everything that it takes to reincarnate, based on the choices that we're making, we choose a percentage that we're going to bring along. And some people report having brought way too much. And there was one case where they way underestimated and brought way too little and dealt with a lot of chronic health issues. So anyway, that's a little factoid. That whole part about leaving part of our soul behind was fascinating because one client said, part of us never leaves spirit world. We are never separate from the maker. So once we come through that portal and we've done the meet and greet, our journey depends on the next steps in our journey, kind of depends on our own soul. We may come back from this life as an extremely troubled soul. We may come back from this life with a lot of unhealed wounds and carrying a lot of emotional and mental and spiritual pain. There are those of us on this planet who are deeply, deeply troubled souls and commit horrendous, egregious acts. And Newton very consistently reports that if it's that sort of situation, then that soul, the moment they come through the portal, that soul is met by their guide and they're taken off basically in isolation. And they're working in a very intense one-on-one situation with their guide, doing very deep healing and very deep soul work. So if we're bringing back some wounds and some deep pain, we receive a time of what they called healing showers. This one man was describing it, and Newton by this time had heard about it enough times, and he said, "Oh, are you talking about the healing shower?" And the guy scoffed and he said, "This is like a car wash." So it's a soul cleansing thing and alleviating us of wounds that we don't need to carry with us. So the healing description is really cool because they talk about a stream of liquid energy, and they said it's like it's reaching into us, it's reaching into our soul, and they report this sense of completely absorbing it and completely being open and present to the experience of restoration and understanding that this is their time to return to wholeness. So it sounds like a very cool experience. I can see hanging out there for quite a while. Coming home to spirit is unfailingly described as coming home. When people get oriented, souls get oriented, it's like, oh, here we are, I'm home. And one person described it in these words. They said, it's like being wrapped in a bright, light blanket of love. And everyone says it's beyond words, it's beyond physical description. So we've done the meet and greet, we've been through the healing shower, and now we have some one-on-one work with our spirit guide. And it's a discussion about our possibilities, the things we might have done, the things we didn't do, what our options were, and what our viewpoints are. Here is, I think, what most people who have studied unity believe, and it flies in the face of traditional religious doctrine. We are not judged. We are not there to be punished, to be reprimanded. Our soul guide is there with us to do check-ins because we set intentions and we set goals before we stepped in to this lifetime. And so they're checking in with us on that. How did this part go? How do you feel your progress was here and there? And several people referenced there's no judgment in spirit world that could be nearly as harsh as we judge ourselves. Does that feel familiar? Judgment day is every day, ain't it? At least in my little corner of the universe it is. So after we've had our one-on-one session with our soul guide, we get to go to our soul groups. And everybody talked about how exciting this was. It literally was like the homecoming. These are my peeps. And we tend to stay in the same soul group over thousands of lifetimes based on our own individual progression and, of course, based on the progression of others in our group. So we know everyone in our soul group very well. I think if I remember correctly, he said the average size of a soul group might be anywhere from 12 to 24 peeps. And we also know people from lots and lots of other soul groups, but the ones in our group are very, very, very deep connections. So we kind of go through this peer life review with them and have some of those same conversations that we did with our soul guide. And then we have this really cool experience where we go into this huge, they said that we would understand it as sort of a library thing. And they said you can't even see all of it. And you go into this area and it's rows and rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of life books. And Newton asked, well, out of, bazillion plus life books, how do you know which ones are yours? And they said, oh, that's easy. When you walk in, yours light up. And so they go over to the shelf and they get their life book. And they said, it's like opening a book, but it's not like looking at a book. They said it's more like being plopped into a 3D movie. And you're in it, you're living it. So you get to watch your life, and you get to go back and revisit your experience of it, your thoughts about it, your emotions about it. And all of this, the Spirit Guide review, the peer group review, and the life book review, all of this serves the purpose of bringing us to higher awareness, higher spiritual awareness. And it serves the purpose of getting us in touch again with our spiritual goals and intentions that we set when we came in. We get to experience our effect on others, how that felt for us and how it felt for them. And then at some point in this whole process, we have a meeting with our council of elders. And our spirit guide is always with us, literally one step behind and slightly to the left. Like not beside us, but there so that we know that we have support. And with the council of elders, just like everyone else that we work with in spirit world, they are not there to judge us. They are not there to come down on us for here's what you didn't do and here's what you missed and here's where you messed up. They are certainly asking us accountability questions. Do you remember that, you had set this intention of XYZ and this is how that went? How do you see that? How do you feel about that? So we go through all those processes, and then according to all of the case studies, we basically hang out in spirit world. It's up to us. There's no one that says, okay, and plus, there's not a time. It's not linear time, so it's not, you get to be here for 50 years and then you're going back. We spend as much time as we want in spirit world. Apparently it's very restful, which sounds very appealing. And they're working on really cool stuff. So they're in these school settings for much of the time. We reach a point, each at our own individual realization, where we are healed, where we feel totally at one with ourselves. And wouldn't you know, then we start to get this pull to consider reincarnation again. So we have this little checklist that we go through. Am I ready for a physical life? Well, we all said yes, but how many look back and go, so am I ready for a new physical life? What specific lessons do I want to learn this round? And where shall I go? Who shall I be for the best opportunities to fulfill those specific lessons? Then we go to this other really cool place. They call it the Ring of Destiny. All of these things are impossible to describe in earthly terms. I remember one client described it as sort of like being in the cockpit of like a super jet. And they said there's this control panel that we manage, and the place is just plastered with these huge screens, and we are shown 2 or 3, they said not unlimited, not a ton, but we're shown 2 or 3 life scenarios that we can step into the movie, and we can have discernment about, I would fit with this one. This one would work for me. And they all were very specific in saying, it's not like we get a play-by-play. It's not this, predetermination, predestined layout. That our free will is very much at play, but it's more about sort of the focus and intention of the life to come, and some of the key people that we'll encounter. So we begin to make those choices. We talk with our peeps in our soul group. Hey, Chris, will you come back and teach me joy and spontaneity? Will you come back and, shake my tree and get me out of the hard and fast framework? Will you come back and help me to know what it means to truly, truly, truly forgive no matter what? So whatever our choices are, we start to talk to souls and ask them if they'll come back and do it with us. One of those conversations that really struck me was a couple. The male was extremely abusive, verbally, physically. It was a wretched, really, really hard life. And he passed before she did. She said when she got to the other side that he was at the front lines of the cheering group, greeting her back, high five, job well done, job well done. And when she made her choice to come into this life, she asked the same person to come back and live out that experience to a deeper level, so that she could learn strength, forgiveness on an even deeper level. So we talk with our guides, we talk with our soul group, and we make these soul agreements to come in, and then we meet with the elder council for a final time. And from what I understand, we choose our gender. Some people have a higher percentage of lives in one gender over the other, but they said over the millennia that it tends to balance out. We choose our sexual orientation, and they said one of the most important things that we give a lot of attention to is our psychological aspects. We choose our family of origin and body type. So stay with me as I pull these quotes out of thin air. This is Newton talking. He says, souls search for self-expression by developing different aspects of their character. Makes sense, right? My subjects say the real lessons of life are learned by recognizing and coming to terms with being human. Even as victims, we are beneficiaries because it is how we stand up to failure and duress, which really makes our progress in life. By the way, some people do choose lives where they get to coast. If they've just had some really, 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 really challenging stuff, they do choose the coast method. Okay, so then back to family of origin. Newton says they give much more attention to the psychological aspects of human life. He's talking about the selecting the earth body. He said this decision, the psychological aspects, this decision is the most vital part of the entire selection process for the soul. Interesting, huh? Here's the some more on that thought. He says the hard tasks we have set for ourselves often begin in childhood. Anybody attest to that? This is why considerable weight is given to family selection by the soul. Although the average person has experienced love from his or her parents, many of us have unresolved, hurtful memories of those near to us who should have offered protection and did not. We grow up thinking of ourselves as victims of biological parents and family members whom we inherited without any choice in the matter. This assumption is wrong. To know ourselves spiritually means understanding why we joined in life with the souls of parents, siblings, spouses, and close friends. Remember, along with learning our own lessons, we come to earth to play a part in the drama of others' lessons as well. Interesting, huh? So, as I said, I'm flying over tons and tons of material, and Ruth and I haven't had our weekly meeting yet, but I'm going to be asking her to get some copies of this in the bookstore. So if you know you want one, see Ruth after the service and get signed up for that. So I want to touch on some major areas, not in any priority, but just touch on things. When does a soul come into the body? In general, sometime between, say, 3 to 7 months after conception. They were very clear that they typically don't come in until there's a brain to work with. So as they come in, they begin that process of merging and synchronization with the human, the physical brain. And we're told that the permanent identity of a soul stamps the human mind with a distinctive character, which is individual to that soul. So, as far as where we come from in connection to spirit, there's this whole fascinating section on people actually seeing souls being born. It's wild. But what the clients say is that we as souls are particles of energized units originating out of the one energy, originating out of, they call it source, and they call it the one, and they call it maker. And they also talked about the ego, because I have a lot of questions around ego. It gets a really interesting rap in some circles. I understand the ego to be like our fingerprint, our soul signature. And one client said that we acquire our character or ego based on the way our energy is put together for us. So the ego is the covenant between oneself and the givers, the one, the source, maker. Here's another random thought. Has anybody ever wondered about the whole idea of suicide and what happens to that soul and the judgment around all of that? I would wager a guess that some of us have very close ones in our lives, and we all, I would guess, know someone who has, and they're very, very clear about that. That, again, not harshly judged, not condemned. It's what the conversation comes down to is, okay, so you went in wanting to learn XYZ and wanting to accomplish XYZ. Yeah, I did. Well, you bailed a little early, so we're just going to do that again. Not immediately, there's a lot of healing work to do. But both the soul and the elders acknowledge, yes, this is still important to me. Yes, this is still my lesson. And yes, I want to go back and do this again. Here's about our guides. They choose us. We didn't choose them. They chose us. I talked about those soul groups. The guides are always with us through thousands of lifetimes, always waiting to be reached out to. They do not interfere. They're not puppeteers. They don't manipulate anything in our lives. And they are the presence. Again and again, clients said, my guide is about grace, about reassurance, about compassion, about kind accountability. And our next to last point is anybody, and this teaching Unity is very clear about hell, heaven and hell. The clients are very clear to report that the only hell, the only suffering that happens on earth. It's not about spirit world. It's not about suffering. It's not about being condemned. There's no evil soul. Yes, we see evil acts. We see evil consciousness in our earthly realm. And we are told that those are very seriously underdeveloped souls, and that when they leave the planet, they get really, really, really intensive rehab. So finally, I kind of ask the question from time to time, so what does Source do all day? And I think it's a valid question, frankly. What does Source do all day? And why are we created? Did you ever wonder that? Like, why life? Why are we created? And I have to remember if this is from Newton or if this was one of the clients reporting. I'm almost there. There's just so much fascinating. Okay. So he's in session with a client who's in life between lives, and he's getting at these questions about, so why does Source create this? Why are we going through this experience? Why is this necessary? And he's asking a question that alludes to, doesn't it suggest that life itself or Source itself lacks full perfection? Pause. The response is, the Source creates for fulfillment of itself. And then he asks another question, and the person responds, we think what the Creator desires is to express itself by birthing. And Newman says, and do you think Source is actually made stronger by our existence as souls? Long pause. I see the Creator's perfection maintained and enriched by sharing the possibility of perfection with us. And this is the ultimate expression of itself. We have to have faith in this decision and trust the process of returning to the origin of life. Let's meditate for a moment. A lot of interesting stuff to digest. A lot of words and concepts and ideas to juxtapose with what our ideas have been up until now. So I invite us all to remember we are here, divine souls, having chosen this human experience. We are here for a purpose that is so much greater, so much deeper, so much higher than we can wrap ourselves around in our conscious mode. And I believe that again and again and again, what calls us back to center is this holy energy, this divine mind, this sacred knowing in us. That we are here to learn, we are here to unfold and to discover into the richest, most glorious expression imaginable. In rolling around in this concepts, one thing that it brings to mind is that phrase, don't sweat the small stuff. And these ideas can really bring fresh meaning to that idea. As we step into the silence this morning, I invite us to remember I am spirit expressing in this now moment. I am here to be the fullest expression of pure love that I can possibly be. And all of these peeps around me have come to share my journey. And here I am sharing theirs. On this holy ground, we connect in the one mind, the maker, the source, the energy that birthed us. Peace. Be still and know that I am. And so it is. So we fully trust that it is so. Amen.